Hello, everybody. So ChatGPT wrote most of this talk, but I had to feed it. You can't just tell it, you know. So how we're going to do this is, this is how I like to do it, is I'm going to give the talk. I think it's going to be like 15 minutes at the most, maybe less. And then we're going to do 5 exercises. And the exercise is going to require groups of 2. There may be a group of 3. I haven't counted exactly where we are now. And we're going to do something a little different. We're going to rotate. So in other words, let's say you and I are in a group. So there's going to be 5 groups. So we'll do the exercise and then I'll say rotate and either be, I don't know, to make it easy. It could be the person on the left will move to the next, to another group. So you'll get a chance to be in 5 different groups. And it's going to be really fast, like 2 minutes in a group, maybe 3. We'll see how it works. That's my thought. Let me get to right. So I came to this inquiry after I did this program. I'll find the right one now. And it said that is a superstition. And it made me think that the program, even though it wasn't a Buddhist program, made me think about Buddhism, like that maybe there really is no is, and there really is no I. So anyway, I'll read the talk, and then we'll do the exercises, and then if there's time, we'll engage in questions and answers. So good evening. Oh, you got the recording on? Great. And thank you for being here. Tonight, I want to explore a question that sits at the core of the Buddhist teaching, but is also deeply unsettling. The idea that the self, the I, we take for granted is an illusion. We spend our lives constructing, defending, and identifying with the self that, according to Buddhism, does not truly exist. If that's the case, who or what are we? To approach this question, we'll reflect on illusion and delusion in Buddhism, the concept of a separate self, impermanence as seen through the law of conservation of mass. Does anybody know what that is? Good. And everybody else doesn't though. and even how different, I didn't know it. And even how different animals perceive reality. Ursa, for example. Each of these ideas challenges our sense of identity and the nature of reality itself. We will also explore how our identities evolve over time and how the case of Victor of, I think I'm pronouncing this right, of Aveyron, the wild child found in 19th century France, provides an extreme example of how selfhood is shaped by experience and environment. How many people know about Victor Aveyron, the wild child in France? No, okay. This was a fellow they found him at age 9, and they didn't know they don't know how many years he lived in the forest. And then he escaped, and I think they found him a couple times at age 12. They tried to get him to be civilized, and they failed. But I'll go into that in a minute. Buddhism teaches that what we call the self is just an ongoing flow of sensations, perceptions, and thoughts. like a river that appears solid but is never the same from one moment to the next. The Buddha uses the term anatta, or non-self, to describe this. But if the self is an illusion, why do we feel so strongly that we are separate, stable beings? This is where delusion comes in. We construct a story of me based on memories, roles, and labels. I am a teacher. I'm a friend. I'm a cat owner. These identities provide comfort, but they are fleeting and conditional. Imagine your life 10 years ago. So just think about that, 10 years ago. Are you the same person now? Your body has changed, your thoughts and values have evolved, and yet we cling to the belief in a continuous I. I mean, it's really weird that we do this. The problem with the illusion is that it leads to attachment and suffering, clinging to what will inevitably change. Our sense of self is not fixed. It evolves as we go through different life experiences. Science confirms this. Studies in psychology show that our memories, preferences, and even moral values change over time. Like, it's hard to believe that I was a juvenile delinquent, but I was.
I can see it.
You could see it. Okay. Thank you. The self is more like a novel being written in real time rather than a book with a completed plot. Think about how you saw yourself as a child, a teenager, and now. What aspects of you have remained constant? What has changed? Even our brains undergo significant rewiring throughout life, shaping our identity. This realization aligns with Buddhist teaching. Clinging to a fixed identity is a form of suffering because it does not match reality. Victor of Aveyron was a feral child found in France in the early 1800s, I think about 1790. Having lived in isolation without human interaction, he lacked what we would consider a personal identity. He had no language, no sense of I as a social being, and did not express emotions the way we expect from humans. This case shows how much of our selfhood is constructed by experience, culture, and interaction. Victor challenges our assumption that the self is something innate. If identity were fixed, he should have had a self even in isolation. But his fragmented development suggests that identity is a process, something we build through interaction with the world. The case echoes the Buddhist perspective. The self is not solid, is not a solid entity, but a construct shaped by conditions. Just as Victor's sense of self was shaped by his isolation, our identities are shaped by language, society, and personal experience, none of which are permanent. Yeah, just imagine a world where if you didn't have language, like you would be a whole different being. If the self is an illusion, what are we then? Buddhism teaches that we are a process, not a fixed entity. Science supports this. Consider the law of conservation mass. Matter is neither created nor destroyed, only transformed. So now you know the law of conservation mass. We didn't know that before. The cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced. The air you breathe was once in the lungs of another person. The food you eat becomes part of you, and eventually you will return to the earth. Likewise, our sense of self is not a single thing, but a shifting state. Think of states of matter. Water can be solid, liquid, or gas, depending on conditions. We too change in different situations. Reserved at work, playful with friends, contemplative at the Dallas Meditation Center. There's no fixed you, only a process of becoming. But if everything has changed, what does that mean for how we live? I found that amazing, and I Googled what happens to us, like the ash that we die, and to realize we are 60% water. So if you're cremated, 60% of you goes into the air. And what we get is ash, like I've got my cat back or as ashes, or maybe you've gotten a human remains. It's just the calcified bones ground up. That's all that's left. We assume that what we see, hear, and feel is reality, but our perception is just one version of the world. Animals experience reality differently. Bats navigate using echolocation. Bees see ultraviolet patterns invisible to us. Dogs perceive time through scent. The world is not the same as ours. Their world is not the same as ours, yet we assume our human experience is the only true reality. This raises an important question. If our perceptions are limited and conditioned, how much of what we call self is just a trick of the mind? What happens when we stop clinging to a single version of reality? Buddhism suggests that awakening happens when we no longer take our thoughts and identities as absolute. This is the path to Nirvana, not a place, but the cessation of illusion and attachment. The Buddha's teaching challenged us to let go of the illusion of a fixed self and embrace the reality of impermanence. We see through our conditioned perception, we begin to loosen our grip of suffering. So I leave you with the question, if you are not who you think you are, then who or what are you? So that's the talk. And now we're going to do the exercises. Yeah, I think the benefit of meditation, it made me think about, is that we start really paying attention to what's really going on, and we could start seeing our thoughts as separate from us and even our feelings. So what I'm going to ask people to do in groups of 2, the first exercise, and again, there may be one group of 3. We're going to look at the self as an illusion, a construct of thoughts, feelings, and experience. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, with another person, in a minute you'll get in a group, let me just tell you the exercise. You're going to close your eyes with this other person and describe who you are without mentioning your name, your job, relationships, or past experience. Okay, so you can't mention, and I apologize that I didn't get this on the screen. Can't mention your name, your job, relationships, or past experience. All right, so why don't we get in groups of 2? We'll see how it works.